I'm going to go ahead and start with a new Prezi, and it's going to go ahead and bring up our background for Prezi. So here's the couple things you need to know. First off, is I almost always start with a blank template, and I highly recommend you do so because most of the time the story that you want to communicate is not sitting inside this this series of options. Actually, I've seen a lot of people try to use some of their preset ones. It's perfectly fine to do so. I think we have a couple of easy tools that will get you going without having to use one of the presets. So I'm going to go ahead and start a blank Prezi, and it's going to bring up our basic backdrop. Now, here's a couple things I want to teach you first about the Prezi. First off is as I go all the way out, you will see that I'm zooming out from that little dot right now, that I eventually hit the end of the universe, end of known universe, okay? And likewise, I can come back in, come back through, and you'll never guess it, but I can hit the end of the known universe a second time, eventually. Cannot zoom anymore. Does that make sense? So this, in essence, is a cube that is our basis. We're going to work inside that cube in 2 dimensions, but what you have to do is just, if you're thinking about something, one thing we've done before is we've taken a mammoth plan and we've zoomed into that plan, but the plan really was the presentation. So it was a linear roadway, and inside that roadway, I wanted to talk about various improvements along the roadway. So I would zoom from piece of that plan to piece of that plan to piece of that plan. Well, because of that, we wanted to set that, we wanted to zoom out and set that out at the furthest extent. That way we could zoom in further on because we know that there was an end of the known universe if I keep zooming in. Does that make sense? So that's just one of the things you want to start off with as you're thinking. Second thing is when you go to the top right-hand corner here, you always, again, start in that top right and come back around. These are, do you guys all know what 14.3, 16.9 is? A handful of you said yes. 14.3, I'm sorry, 4.3. 4.3, yes. 4.3 is the screen you're looking at right now. 4 high, 3 wide. A 16.9 is a widescreen ratio. Remember how that hand was cut off just a couple minutes ago? It's because that presentation was set at 16.9. In other words, it was set for showing in widescreen. I'll give you a hint. Most of the time, our presentations, as well as anything you're going to be doing, is almost always preset for 4.3 because most presentations are still not done in widescreen yet. So always start off setting up that screen at 4.3. Second thing you're going to do is come in, again, right to left, and I want to set a background image on my slide. Now, the only time that you're going to ignore this is when you're setting your background image. In essence, Prezi knows when you're putting too big pictures into the software, so it's going to automatically manage for you how big or how small the pixels are based on what you're doing inside the software package. It keeps you from walking in someone's office with a 3 gig presentation that's going to crash anything that goes near, right? So on your background image, though, you never want to resize your background image. I'm always going to go with keep my original inside of here. So here's my background image I just now worked with. Now, basically, this becomes the basis for what I'm going to create my presentation on. The first presentation I showed you, it was a series of 24 boxes in essence, and we put a hand in it just to give it some extra fun. But in essence, that was my backdrop. In this case, I'm going to be using the clouds as my backdrop. So once I'm inside of that, in essence, what I want to start doing is start creating the story. And again, we're going from that right-hand side to that left-hand side. I'm just going to go ahead and put a couple of images inside of here. You'll see, again, it's going to pull up recommended images. All of these images have Creative Commons licensing on them again. We, in marketing, typically still ignore that, and we'll pull stuff off of our server. If you were giving a presentation to one other person, have at Creative Commons, but we do try and be careful about making sure we have licensing rights to different things we're looking at. Did that make sense to everybody, the licensing rights? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and select, and again, I preset some of these just for a quick Prezi presentation. And let's go ahead and toss in some airplanes here. So again, it's telling me it's too large this time. I'm going to go ahead and let it resize for me. And you'll note, basically, as I'm looking at the image, there's several different things I can do. I can crop it. I can do a series of effects on the image. I likewise can come off of any of the corners. Do you see that little tiny circle that's popping up? I can grab off that circle and adjust my image. or likewise I can come in and change the effects on my image. Basically, there's lots of different pieces I can do. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and insert a couple more pictures here. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a symbol or shape. I'm going to do some luggage. I'm going to go ahead and insert another image, and I'm going to insert another plane. I think I have down here. I'm going to take this one, turn it a little bit more this way, grab the corner, shrink it up just a little bit, and actually we'll get started with that. So this basically is my presentation, the basis for my presentation. Actually, there's quite a few other things that you can include in here. Actually, I do have one. Let's see if I can grab it. So I'm going to grab this out of YouTube. I'm just going to grab that URL. I'm going to go ahead and insert a video. Grab my link, put it in. Lost my center. I'm not sure why I grabbed that just now, but we'll grab it back. Okay, because we want to end this with a view of that video. So here basically is the basis for it. Now, right now is all I've got, and you can insert basically any of these other pieces. We can insert images, symbols, and shapes. You saw me toss one of those in a YouTube. You can do different layouts. You can draw arrows. You can draw lines, background music. You can import things from PDF. You can insert slides from PowerPoint. Long and short is there's a load of different assets that you can just toss in. I'm just going to toss in those to give you a baseline for it. And then we're going to continue to keep going around with what I'm doing. And the last thing, or the next thing I want to do is just kind of look at what do I actually want to talk about inside this presentation. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and start off with starting to create some of my actual path itself. So I'm going to go ahead and edit path, and I want this right here, the view I'm looking at, to be my first slide. So I'm going to add current view to the screen. And what you're going to see is, in essence, on my left-hand side of the screen, you're going to start seeing my slides showing up. Now, my slides aren't really slides. All they are is portions of my picture, right? But in essence, as I start grabbing these, you're going to see, so I'm going to grab this one next, and I'm still on edit path. I'm just going to click on that picture, and you're going to see it's going to drag that next slide over. Next one is going to drag that next slide over. And you know what? At one point here, I'm going to want to talk more holistically. So I'm going to grab my current view again and grab that in. And then, you know what? I'm actually going to ignore that luggage. You guys get the gist there. And this particular video, I actually kind of want to talk about it. Actually, you know what? I'm going to kill my path here for 2 seconds. I'm going to drag that video over top of this luggage because I want to do an interesting story here. So these two things I'm going to be wanting to talk about holistically, and I want to be able to create a path that looks over top of both of them. Because right now, those paths I set up, I was just creating that path based on either a view I was in, or I was creating it based on the individual assets, the airplanes, so I was clicking on those. And this particular time, what I want to do is I want to talk about both these things. So I'm going to insert a frame. Frames become very important as we get into this, but basically all a frame is it's an area that we can put text, we can put information, we can put different pieces that we're zooming into. So I'm going to go ahead and grab an invisible frame. You're going to see it's going to pop in, and I just missed it. Where's my frame? No, there we go. And I'm just going to put a frame over top of these two pieces. And then I'm going to go ahead and add that frame to my presentation. Does that make sense? So now you can see, in essence, those 5 frames, those 5 pieces become my slide. Now, the last thing I kind of want to do before I start looking at this presentation is I want to make certain that I'm adding, can't zoom anymore, gotta love it. I want to add some title to this. So all I'm going to do is just click on my background, turn off my edit path. And I want to provide a title here, which is So I'm going to switch that over to my title. And then I'm going to go with a subtitle here is two separate words or one? Someone help me out with that? The song, I assume, is two separate words. Okay, who knows that song? I was expecting more of you guys. Seriously? How many of you have seen Top Gun? Okay, it's better than I thought. If you haven't, it's a requirement for something. I'm not sure what. But in essence, so I've tossed those in there. Now notice, when I'm working, when I just now was doing that text, I could add title, subtitle, body, or just like anything else, I can just plain old mess with my text and come up with different parameters. I can make the text larger. I can make it smaller. Long and short is there's lots of different options inside there. But the reason I always use title, body, subtitle, and body is because we're going to start looking at the actual fonts and the different things that we're looking at, with the presentation in a couple minutes. And if I have it set as a title and I change what the font is for my title, every single title inside the presentation changes to that new font. Or likewise, subtitle. You guys have used this in Word and other places for years. So that's why I'm using my title, subtitle, and body. So now I'm going to go ahead and jump in and let's start actually seeing what we're putting together. So here's our original slide that we talked about. Now note that what happens when I go to my next slide is that the whole screen just now turned. Remember when I grabbed the corner of that airplane and dragged it around? Well, what I'm doing is I'm actually creating the camera turns as I'm zooming in on those different areas. I can do that. I'm going to zoom it back and it's going to rotate to the other one and flatten that out. Likewise, we'll bring it over to the end here, and you'll see the video kind of at the end of what we were talking about. Now, I embedded a YouTube video here, by the way. If I embed a YouTube video, it cannot automatically start. The video that we saw in the first presentation, I uploaded the video into Prezi. So just a heads up, if you're working with video, you need to upload it if you're going to be wanting it to automatically play. Otherwise, inside the presentation, you're actually going to have to jump in and make the actual mouse click on it. Okay, now a couple of things. If I wanted to be working right here and I wanted text on top of my airplane, well, the question is, do I want that text to be crooked or do I want it to be straight when I'm looking at that particular slide? If you want it to be straight when you're looking at that particular slide, well, actually I'll show you here right now. If I want it to be crooked, there you go sideways instead. Or I can actually zoom into, when I actually zoom into this plane, you'll see the screen while I'm in edit mode is going to change, and then I can go straight. Does that make sense? So now when I go back through my presentation, you're going to see that what is going to be straight is actually what's equivalent with whatever the frame was that I'm looking at when I'm actually looking at that individual image. Does that make sense? So you know that when I first typed sideways, it was flat screen. But when I start digging into my images, I'm going to have to start adjusting that with it. Now, one thing I have really left out here, and by the way, you can see right now, actually, this is a common problem, is you're in the middle of editing something, and all of a sudden your entire screen is turned some opposite direction. That's very, very irritating because you're not quite certain how to get back to it. Your frames on the left become your secret. Because the second I click on any of those, it's going to take me directly to that as if that particular area was level. Does that make sense? So I'll come in here and you'll see all of a sudden if I want to edit something on that. So I'm using the navigation on the left-hand side as part of my creation process to jump through it. Now, it's interesting, one of the things that usually people start with that I haven't done here is you notice I haven't started putting in what many of you who've messed with Prezi, most people come up and they start just creating frames. So I'm going to do that now at this point because my preference actually is to start creating those frames after I'm already in on my presentation. So I'm going to come back over here and you'll see I'm going to go ahead and add a frame in. Edit path just so I can get that easy to it. I'm going to zoom in on that frame, and you'll see the brackets that are here. And then I'm going to go ahead and double click and just put in some text. And let's say I want that text a little bit bigger. Okay, so now once you've created the baseline for your Prezi is when you want to start putting in your content. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and talk about that customizing since I'm sitting inside this box. You remember we did that background originally? Well, we get to this point where we want to start putting templates to this because right now I'm just using kind of a standard, I believe I'm on clear right now, background inside of here. Actually, I wasn't unclear. I'm not even sure which one I was on. But in essence, these are the places where we can start changing what the actual presentation looks like. From your text, from your fonts. It doesn't change your images, but it's the equivalent of the slide master in PowerPoint, where you go in and you can change the entire slide. The headings on every single slide and the font on those headings. That is what the customized themes are here. They're just slide masters in essence. And you can see the box right here on the left-hand side of this. The text is all changing as I go through and look at different options. Does that make sense to everybody? So we're going to go ahead and go with whatever I just clicked on. We'll go with that. And in essence, the entire presentation, all of the different pieces we just now were looking at, will change according to that new format. Now, one of the big questions I get as we're going through this is the reality is I really don't want that that YouTube video to show up until I'm ready to show it. Actually, you'll see, if you see someone that's just beginning with with Prezi, oftentimes you'll see all their slides kind of jumbled in because they start off with all of their slides showing. And just like PowerPoint, I want to end with all my slides, well, not just like PowerPoint, I want to end with all my slides showing, but I want to slowly bring them in as I'm talking about each of those topics. Now, I can hide them in Prezi a couple different ways. One is I could zoom so far into this airplane engine right here that you could never see the slide to begin with, right? In which case I'm just going to zoom straight in my presentation and hit on that particular piece. The other thing I can do is just simply fade stuff in as it becomes relevant. Now here's the catch with Prezi. If you fade it in, you can't fade it out. The reason is because Prezi is designed so that at the end you're talking holistically about what your presentation topic was. In other words, you're constantly adding to, but you're not taking away from the presentation. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, me personally, I wish they'd just add the tool, but they haven't added the fade out tool. The way around it is you're just simply putting content on top of content. So if I have something I really need to go away, I just simply put another piece of content over top of it as I'm going through the presentation. Does that make sense? Okay. So inside here, I actually want to make this video fade in instead of just instantly showing up. What you have to do is, first off, do you remember when I put this in a frame? The frame is required to use do fading in. The reason fading in is required inside a frame is because otherwise you would get this convoluted mess of 100 different fade-ins and not knowing when they came in at what different points in time. The frame is always something that's zoomed to, and then you just control the fading inside of that frame. In essence, you're adding to your timeline on the left-hand side here, you're adding to that timeline, just fading different things inside a particular view. And the reality is you don't really want to fade something in unless it's inside a particular view anyways. You don't want to have something fade in off on the left-hand side of the screen that has no applicability to what's inside that frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Edit Path, and inside this box what you'll see is this lovely little tiny Animate Frame button. When I click on that, it's going to bring up the dialog, which you can see is the animation dialog, and allows me just simply to click it, and you can see the order. Order 1, Order 2 is just simply the order that I clicked it in. I can reset it, so I can go here and then here, or likewise, I can just turn it off on one particular one just by clicking the X that's right next to it. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. When you're done with that, you have to click Done just so it's saving that permanently. So that becomes, in essence, our presentation that we're looking at. So let's go ahead and present with this thing and see where we're at. So it's going to start off We're going to talk about the Boeing aircraft in this case. We've got frame 1, frame 2. You can see we're just walking down there, basically down that left-hand side. You'll see in this last one, do you see how we zoomed in? I actually didn't put this text box into that engine just because it's a black backdrop, but you can really get in to very, very small minutia inside one of these presentations. Remember, you have all that depth I was scrolling through back out and all the way in to be able to look at different pieces. And then I'm going to come in here. You guys remember we had our fade in for the YouTube video, and you can pick it up basically wherever you're at. In this case, I will spare you guys watching airplanes from Cars. If you don't have kids, it's still a good movie, but not as good as the original Cars.